It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson is here with an acronym soup, including DoD's new DIB-VDP program. We're going to talk about OpenSSF, and then a simple way to tell the world you don't want to be tracked. And this time, it really works. You're going to stay tuned, I hope, for this one. It's all coming up next on Security Now.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 869, recorded Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022, Global Privacy Control. Security Now is brought to you by PlexTrack, the proactive security management platform that helps you focus on winning the right security battles. With PlexTrack, you'll streamline the full workflow from reporting to remediation. Visit plextrack.com/twit and claim your free month. And by Bitwarden. Get the password manager that offers a robust, cost-effective solution that can drastically increase your chances of staying safe online. Get started with a free trial of a Teams or Enterprise plan, or get started for free across all devices as an individual user at bitwarden.com/twit. And by IT Pro TV. Give your team an engaging IT development platform to level up their skills. Volume discounts start at 5 seats. Go to itpro.tv/security now and make sure to mention SN30 to your IT Pro TV account executive to get 30% off or more on a business plan. It's time for Security Now, the show every Tuesday that answers the vital question, what the heck? And here's the man with the answers to all your questions, Steve Gibson. What could possibly go wrong is actually
what could possibly, yeah, that's really
the question you really, you really do answer. Steve from GRC.com. Hello, Steve.
I have sort of a blast from the past, some good news. This is Security Now, episode 869. This is our first episode of May 2022, titled Global Privacy Control. And the subtitle is Hope Springs Eternal. I'm hopeful. That's my nature. I've always been hopeful. I refuse not to be hopeful. Why not have hope? Anyway, this is... rather than a ton of little topics, the way it turned out, we have a number of bigger topics. We're going to examine the success of the abbreviation overloaded DoD's DIB-VDP pilot program. Boy, the government loves their initials. We're going to introduce the relatively new OpenSSF, the Open Source Security Foundation, with the introduction of their first project, which is they call the Package Analysis Project. We're going to look at some hopeful new privacy legislation recently passed in Connecticut's House, which, if signed into law, would allow it to join 4 other existing privacy progressive states, among which California and Colorado number, and now they're being considered the 3 Cs, Connecticut, California, and Colorado. And we're going to talk about that. We're also going to look, I got a kick out of this. Someone must have tweeted this to me. Moxie Marlinspike, who, of course, famous for being the lead designer of the Signal messaging platform. He developed his own port knocking solution a decade ago. And I loved, he asked himself at the end of his page on GitHub about this, like, why do you even need this? And I know that everyone will get a kick out of his answer. We've also got a bunch of listener feedback. And then we're going to talk about what global privacy control is and why this time might be different. So I think another great podcast for our listeners.
Excellent. Very excited. Before we get into this, let me take a little time out for our first sponsor, of the show, PlexTrack. We talk about them all the time, the purple teaming platform. It's a proactive cybersecurity management platform, if you want big words. But what it really does is it helps your security teams get their job done with a minimum of, fuss, bureaucracy. They could focus on finding the flaws and remediating them without focusing a lot on writing reports and all that stuff. If you're ready to gain the benefits of a purple team but have no clue how to get started, maybe you want to secure your security posture, but you're having a hard time optimizing efficiency and facilitating collaboration within your teams, this is a great solution for you. And if you're on the front line, if you're where the rubber hits the road, if you're one of those security team members, you're going to really want PlexTrack because it takes the busy work out of your job and puts the fun back in. PlexTrack is a powerful yet simple cybersecurity platform that centralizes all the security assessments, all the pen test reports, all the audit findings, all the vulnerability tracking, and then makes it really easy to write reports, to work, to collaborate, to get them remediated. It really transforms your risk management life cycle because your security teams will generate better reports faster with less aggravation. They can aggregate and visualize analytics, and they can collaborate on remediation in real time, all through PlexTrack. The PlexTrack platform addresses pain points across the spectrum of security team workflows and roles. And I'll tell you about some of the modules. There's a number of them, but the reports module is really the thing that you'll use probably most often to report your security findings. You could put code samples in, embed them very easily, screenshots, videos. You can import findings from all the tools. You use all the scanning tools. You can export to custom templates with the click of a button. We use existing templates. Once you've got a template, it makes the reporting much, much easier. You're not spending a lot of time typing. You're spending more time testing. There's a runbooks module you'll love because it facilitates all your tabletop exercises and your red team engagements, your breach and attack simulations, your purple teaming activities. It'll improve communication and collaboration. PlexTrack upgrades your program's capabilities by making the most of every team member and tool. And again, taking out the busy work so they really can focus on the stuff that really matters. There's also an analytics module. You'll really appreciate this because it helps you visualize your security posture so you can quickly assess and prioritize, which creates a more effective workflow. You can map risks to frameworks like MITRE ATT&CK to create a risk register. Enterprise security teams love PlexTrack to streamline their pen tests, security assessments, incident response reports, and much more, keeping red and blue teams focused on getting the real security work done. With PlexTrack, you'll gain precious time back in your team's day, and you'll improve your morale or your employees' morale. PlexTrack enterprise customer Jacobs Engineering gave us a great quote. Deploying PlexTrack allowed our teams to cut the reporting cycle by 65%. Wow. Book a demo today and see how much time PlexTrack can save your team. Try it free for 1 month. See how it can improve the effectiveness and efficiency of your security team. Simply go to plextrack.com/twit. Claim your free month. PLEXTRAC, plextrack.com/TWIT. Thank you, PlexTrack, for supporting the good work Steve does here on Security Now. And you support us by going to that address so they know you saw it here. plextrack.com/security now. I didn't even ask, Steve, do we have a picture of the week?
We do, as a matter of fact.
Oh, good.
It'll be a bit of a surprise.
All right.
One of our listeners posted this in the SpinRight development group, but I just got a kick out of it.
It's really good news.
It's SpinRight running on a MacBook.
Wow. Wow. Look at this. Holy cow.
Yeah. The other cool thing is I remember a long time ago guessing that I thought that the new SpinRight would be so fast that it could do, I think I had said 0.5 terabyte per hour was my estimate of its speed. As we can see from the screen here, and he's just run the benchmark where we're benchmarking the front, the middle, and the end of the drive. And we can see that this 250 gig drive in the MacBook would take 7.9 minutes for SpinRight to scan. So that's, 4 times that is about 30. So that would mean 30 minutes to do a terabyte. In other words, we're doing 2 terabytes per hour rather than half a terabyte per hour. So it really becomes, far more feasible to run SpinRight on these today's really massive drives.
How are you running on a MacBook? Do you have to boot into FreeDOS or?
You do need to have Boot Camp, so it uses Boot Camp.
Okay, so not the modern MacBooks, unfortunately.
Exactly, not the most recent MacBooks that did remove Boot Camp. And you can see in the picture, he's got a thumb drive plugged into the USB there in the back right of the keyboard. And so he intercepted the boot and booted FreeDOS. So Intel only, and you do need Boot Camp. So certainly on all of the older MacBooks, it'll run perfectly. So anyway, just very cool little picture. It caught me by surprise. I said, hey, cool. Because I've actually run it on my MacBook years ago when I diddled the keyboard. The reason it wouldn't ever run before was that once SpinRight starts going, it directly pulls the keyboard hardware. Well, PCs have keyboard hardware. Macs don't. They have a USB keyboard which interfaces and sort of emulates the BIOS, but SpinRight wasn't. It was like pushing past the emulation, so you couldn't run it. Even though everything else worked about it, it just wouldn't. The keyboard died after you started up SpinRight. So I've made sure that won't happen in the future. And it's going to be so much faster. Okay. The DoD's DIB-VDP pilot.
MOUSE. Yeah.
Yeah. So the program of the DoD, that's our U.S. Department of Defense, was named the DIB-VDP pilot program. And despite suffering from program name abbreviation overload, it just successfully finished its year-long pilot test. This is the DIB stands for Defense Industrial Base. VDP is Vulnerability Disclosure Program, thus DIB-VDP. It was a 12-month voluntary event established collaboratively by DC3s, and DC3s, Defense. No, that's DCSA. Anyway, it's here somewhere. Oh, Defense Cybercrime Center is the DC3. Oh, my God. So established collaboratively by DC3s, that's the Defense Cybercrime Center, DoD, Defense Industrial Base Collaborative Information Sharing Environment. And I kid you not, that's the DCISE. So... and the DoD Vulnerability Disclosure Program, thus the DoD VDP, and the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, the DCSA. Right. That year-long bug bounty program scrutinized a fraction, and this is key because we're going to see what a fraction it was, a fraction of the U.S.'s massive defense industrial base. Yesterday, on Monday, the efforts organizers announced that more than 400 valid vulnerabilities had been uncovered. So during the 12-month pilot program, nearly 300 vulnerability security researchers from HackerOne, that's where they were sourced, because you had to be vetted. And we talked about this a year ago, like that this was going to start, and you had to be vetted. You just couldn't come wandering in and attack the U.S. government and hope to get away with it. So HackerOne was the coordinator. Those nearly 300 vulnerability researchers filed 1,015 reports during their examination of the networks of individual participating defense contractors to the DoD. As a result of their scrutiny, those 401 vulnerabilities were deemed actionable and required remediation. The pilot effort was run in coordination with the Defense Cyber Crime Center, that's the DC-3, and the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, the DCSA. The program began with 14 companies and 141 public-facing assets. That is to say, those were the targets. 14 companies with 141 public-facing assets were initially offered to these HackerOne hackers. Then over the course of the year, that effort was expanded to include 41 entities and 348 systems. Now, the point of this is minuscule. What should give the program managers pause is that 401 actionable vulnerabilities were found in those 348 systems belonging to 41 entities, yet somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 companies contract directly with the Pentagon and its components. So, like I said, literally, so more than one actionable vulnerability found per system on average, and about 10 per entity that contributed and participated voluntarily in the program. And we have a minimum, and I'm not sure why the number that was quoted was so large. I mean, to say between 100,000 and 300,000 is like, okay, well, how could it be a 3-to-1, give or take? But anyway, that's the U.S. government for you. So this legitimizes the long-running worry, which, about the latent digital vulnerabilities of the firms that make up the Department of Defense's supply chain, which has, as we know, been rocked by a number of major breaches over the years. For example, one of the most notorious incidents, which I referred to sort of in passing last week, occurred back in 2009 when suspected Chinese hackers broke into one of the contractors working on the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which, as we know, is the most expensive weapons platform ever in U.S. history, and made off with its design data. Whoops. So Melissa Weiss, the interim director of the DoD Vulnerability Disclosure Program, said, so she was directing this effort, said, the pilot bug bounty, which concluded at the end of April, intended to identify whether similar critical and high-severity vulnerabilities existed on small to medium cleared and non-cleared DIB, that's Defense Industrial Base, so that's collectively how these companies, these contractors are known, company assets with potential risks for critical infrastructure and the U.S. supply chain, unquote. That was Melissa saying that. So, armed with this data, an analysis of the DIB Vulnerability Report Management Network, which is yet another abbreviation, will now take place in order to document the pilot program's lessons learned and inform the way forward for a fully funded program. Alex Rice, the co-founder and CTO of HackerOne, who, as I said, was the organizing, HackerOne provided the hackers. He said, quote, with CISA now mandating vulnerability disclosure for government agencies and federal contractors, the DIB-VDP takes the practice a leap forward by demonstrating the efficacy of vulnerability disclosure programs in the real world. So, the fiscal 2022 Defense Policy Bill required the DoD to assess the feasibility of allowing a threat hunting program on the defense industrial base to read out foreign hackers and study the possibility of establishing a threat information sharing program for what has become a sprawling DoD enterprise. Yeah, if you got 300,000, well, 100,000 or 300,000, you're not really sure. Subcontractors, that's sprawling. Earlier this year, the DoD CIO, John Sherman, said the Pentagon was getting rolling on both of those examinations, which, as I said, the fiscal 2022 defense policy bill required that they do this, so they did. Now we've seen, and the bureaucracy has witnessed, the clear feasibility of these programs. And when you stop to think about it, this approach makes so much sense. No sane and talented white hat hacker is going to poke at government networks and systems at the risk of triggering a law enforcement action against them, right? We've seen exactly that happen in the past. So that must be done within the bounds of a sanctioned bug hunting program. And similarly, no sane and talented white hat hacker, no matter how patriotic, is going to invest their valuable time doing such poking for free, when they could be potentially earning a bounty from poking at some private enterprises, networks, and systems that pays a bounty. So the government needs to pay, and no private enterprise has as much money lying around as the government or a government, so paying is not a problem. So it really ought to be that fully sanctioned government bug bounty programs which allow hackers to earn bounties which are competitive with those in the private sector become a permanent reality in the future. Successes such as we're seeing here, this and what we saw during this DoD DIB-VDP, though they really do need a sexier name for it, move us another step in that direction. So this was all good. And, a lot of people said, wait a minute, 10 vulnerabilities which needed action per contractor on average. And we have how many hundreds of thousands of contractors? So, yeah. Okay. We've never talked about the relatively recently formed OpenSSF. Hard to pronounce or say. OpenSSF stands for Open Source Security Foundation. It's a Linux Foundation project created in 2020 by a very large group of significant tech and financial firms with a charter to help steer, guide, and share open source security tools, which unfortunately are lacking. Its membership is divided into two classes, Premier and General members, with the Premier members in an alphabetical order being 1Password, AWS, Atlassian, Cisco, Citi, Coinbase, Dell, Ericsson, Fidelity, GitHub, Google, Huawei, Intel, IBM, JFrog, JP Morgan, Meta, Microsoft, Morgan Stanley, Oracle, Red Hat, Sync, Sonatype, VMware, and Wipro. And there are about 3 times as many general members, which I won't enumerate, but, many are equally notable. Like, there's Bloomberg, Comcast, Goldman Sachs, MongoDB, Spotify, SUSE, Tenable, Tencent, Carnegie Mellon, and MITRE. So, again, this is a heavyweight group. I also saw in some reporting that Samsung was a member, but they weren't listed on the group's official page. So at openssf.org, by the way. So that page, openssf.org, says open source software is pervasive in data centers, consumer devices, and applications. Securing open source supply chains requires a combination of automated tooling, best practices, education, and collaboration. And so they divide the effort that they're organizing into 3 components. There's working groups where they say collaborate on the planning, design, and delivery of security tooling and best practices that secure critical open source projects. Then they have town halls, stay informed about the latest happenings in open source security, and engage with experts in our community, and training. Take free courses on secure coding practices as part of our Software Development Fundamentals Professional Certificate. So all of that is nothing but good. You know, it feels like it's coming along a little late in the game, but wow, you know, better than never. Okay, so that's the OpenSSF. We're talking about this previously undiscussed group today because last Thursday they announced the first results, which were a success, with some caveats that I'll discuss, of their project known as the Package Analysis Project. I've got a link in the show notes for anyone who's interested. But to introduce it, they explained package analysis, scanning open source packages for malicious behavior. And so they said, today we're pleased to announce the initial prototype version of the Package Analysis Project, an OpenSSF project addressing the challenge of identifying malicious packages in popular open source repositories. And, you know, talk about something we've been talking about a lot recently, open source repositories. They said in just 1 month of analysis, the project identified more than 200 malicious packages uploaded to PyPI and NPM. Okay, so, you know, think about that for a minute. Thanks to this project, 200 previously present but unknown malicious Python and JavaScript packages were found. In a minute, I'll share some of the details about what they found, but their announcement continues saying, the Package Analysis Project seeks to understand the behavior and capabilities of packages available on open source repositories. What files do they access? What addresses do they connect to? And what commands do they run? The project also tracks changes in how packages behave over time to identify when previously safe software begins acting suspiciously. This effort is meant to improve the security of open source software by detecting malicious behavior, informing consumers selecting packages, and providing researchers with data about the ecosystem. Though the project has been in development for a while, it has only recently become useful following extensive modifications based on initial experiences. Okay, so what they've built is a big heuristic engine which is capable of performing static code analysis, currently of packages residing in Python and JavaScript repositories. And as is the case with heuristics, which we can think of as, complex rules of thumb, tweaking and adjusting of weighting factors is typically necessary. But if the signals they're able to obtain from their static code analysis are strong enough, robust determinations should be possible. So they continue. The vast majority of the malicious packages we detected are dependency confusion and typo squatting attacks. The packages we found, they said, usually contain a simple script that runs during an install and calls home with a few details about the host. These packages, they conjecture, are most likely the work of security researchers looking for bug bounties, since most are not exfiltrating meaningful data except the name of the machine or a username, and they make no attempt to disguise their behavior. Still, any one of these packages could have done far more to hurt the unfortunate victims who installed them. So, package analysis provides a countermeasure to these kinds of attacks. They said there are lots of opportunities for involvement with this project. So they're also soliciting from, the community, and our listeners are part of that community. They said, and we welcome anyone interested in contributing to the future goals of, there are 4 of them, detecting differences in package behavior over time, automating the processing of the package analysis results, storing the packages themselves as they're processed for long-term analysis, and improving the reliability of the pipeline. They then finished, check out our GitHub project and milestones for more opportunities, and feel free to get involved on the OpenSSF Slack. This project is one of the efforts of the OpenSSF Securing Critical Projects Working Group. You can also explore other OpenSSF projects like SLSA, I didn't dig into what that was, and SigStore, which expand beyond the security of packages themselves to address package integrity across the supply chain. So, this is very welcome news. As we know, for the past several weeks especially, I've been lamenting the inherent lack of security of the systems that have been built to make sharing code libraries virtually effortless. The trouble has been that polluting these code repositories is also effortless. And recently, we've seen this process even being automated with bots to further thwart code identification and its takedown. I mentioned some specific examples from among the more than 200 malicious packages discovered during the first month of the system's use. The first two attacks listed in their case study, published on GitHub, were against Discord clients and their users. They explained that Discord attacks are focused on attacking Discord accounts or clients. They said stolen accounts can be resold, used for fraud, like cryptocurrency scams, or used to gain insider knowledge or secrets. The first one that was over on PyPy is Discord CMD. And in their analysis results, they said, this Python package will attack the desktop client for Discord on Windows. It was found by spotting the unusual requests to raw.githubusercontent.com, Discord API, and ipinfo.io. They said, first, it downloaded a backdoor from GitHub and installed it into the Discord Electron client. Next, it looked through various local databases for the user's Discord token. It grabbed the data associated with the token from the Discord API and exfiltrated it back to a Discord server controlled by the attacker. And what's so cool, of course, is that they found this with automated scanning heuristics. The second Discord malware was over on NPM, and it was titled Color SSS. In their analysis result, they said similar to Discord CMD above, this NPM package attempts to steal a Windows user's Discord account token and was discovered by identifying calls to the Discord API. This package first searches through local browser databases for a token, queries the Discord server to discover details about the token, and exfiltrates the details to a Discord server controlled by the attacker. They also, during this first month of scanning, discovered a couple of remote shells. They explain, for those who don't know, a remote shell is used by an attacker to provide access to a command shell running on a target machine over the network. They're usually reverse shells that connect back to an attacker-controlled machine. So we have over on NPM, this one was Roku-web-core/Ajax, and they explained during install, this NPM package exfiltrates details of the machine it's running on, and then opens a reverse shell, allowing the remote execution of commands. This package was discovered from its requests to an attacker-controlled address. Another one in Python over on PyPy is Ccrev3, and the analysis says this package opens a simple reverse shell when a specific module is imported from the library, allowing remote command execution. It uses a simple obfuscation technique to make it harder for a reader to notice. This package was discovered from the request to the attacker-controlled address. And lastly, over on NPM, this one was random-voucher code-generator. And they said when the library is imported, it queries a server running on their Heroku cloud platform. The server response includes a command and a flag indicating whether or not the command should be run. In the response we observed, the command stopped a process managed by PM2. However, they said, the same response can be changed to run any command the attacker wished to execute, including opening a reverse shell. The library then uses voucher code generator to provide the advertised functionality. So, you get your voucher code generator, but you'll get a reverse shell that you probably didn't count on. They said this package was discovered from the unusual request to the Heroku server. Their case studies page finishes by talking about dependency confusion and typo squatting, where they just, we've been talking about that recently, where, remember that dependency confusion, they did note that packages typically used a high version number. So the package managers that don't know better see that a high version number is available, higher than the one they have, and say, oh, I better go get that. And of course, when they do, they get themselves pwned. So not good. As we've covered previously, and I was just going to talk about exactly that the use of high version numbers in order to trick package managers into obtaining it. Google, who is an active participant in this effort, added a bit of additional background in their own blog posting. They said, despite open source software's essential role in all software built today, it's far too easy for bad actors to circulate malicious packages that attack the systems and users running that software. Unlike mobile app stores that can scan for and reject malicious contributions, and this is Google speaking, we know how tough even that is for them. Package repositories, they write, have limited resources to review the thousands of daily updates that must maintain an open model where anyone can freely contribute. Thus one of the big problems. As a result, malicious packages like UA-parser-JS, which we actually had spoken of previously, and Node-IPC are regularly uploaded to popular repositories despite their best efforts, with sometimes devastating consequences for users. Google, they write, a member of the Open Source Security Foundation, is proud to support the OpenSSF's package analysis project, which is a welcome step forward helping secure the open source packages we all depend upon. The package analysis program performs dynamic analysis of all packages uploaded to popular open source repositories and catalogs the results in a BigQuery table. By detecting malicious activities and alerting consumers to suspicious behavior before they select packages, this program contributes to a more secure software supply chain and greater trust in open source software. The program also gives insight into the types of malicious packages that are most common at any given time, which can guide decisions about how to better protect the ecosystem. Okay, so this is all for the good. The bad news is that this again puts us back into, I think, a pretty clear cat and mouse game. Because the project is inherently open, the bad guys can learn what the system is keying on and simply arrange to avoid it. How many times in those descriptions I just shared did we hear, quote, this package was discovered from the request to the attacker-controlled address, right? Or another of those, several of those descriptions said, these dependency confusion attacks were discovered through the domains they used, such as burpcollaborator.net, pipedream.com, interact.sh, which are commonly used for reporting such attacks, unquote. So the bad news is, once the bad guys learn that these simple factors, which did not previously interfere with their nefarious aims, have become problematic for them to use, they'll simply stop using such obvious targets by arranging to use non-obvious addresses, such as by proxying their connections through any of the gazillion compromised consumer routers on the internet. We've already discussed, such readily available proxying being used to hide connections back to command and control servers. In this case, it wasn't necessary to do that before. Now it is. So it'll happen. We already saw something similar with the adoption of package submission bots, which we were just talking about the other day, being used to create unique per package submission accounts. This prevented casual linkage to other malware, which had also been submitted by the same, maldoer. The underlying problem is that at the moment, and as Google referred to, saying it was crucial and necessary, anyone is able to offer packages for submission. There's no reputation system in place, and the problem with reputation-based filtering is that, yes, it can be discriminatory, preventing valid unknown publishers who've not yet established a reputation from contributing their efforts. So we still have some problems to solve. Nevertheless, it is wonderful that the inherent value and power of open source software and its need for some form of security oversight is being formally recognized, and that we now have an OpenSSF, an open source security foundation, which will focus and work towards introducing improvements in this valuable ecosystem. And again, if anybody is looking for some to contribute to, something, some way to apply their skills, I think this is great, because, the gotcha here in the whole OSS movement is that security is as big a problem there as it is for the closed source world. And Leo, I'm getting a little hoarse here. So before we talk about Connecticut's recent legislation, I'm going to take a sip of water.
Well, no need to get hoarse. We will be glad to take over here. Thank you, Steve. Our show today brought to you, as I mentioned earlier, by Bitwarden. Very big fan, as you know, of Bitwarden. I switched over to Bitwarden a couple of years ago because I was looking for a password manager that was open source, so it could, it could easily be verified, doing what it said it did. It also meant that I could use it for free forever. I could host my own vault if I wanted to, things like that. I really like it. Bitwarden is the only open source cross-platform password manager that could be used at home and at work or on the go, and is trusted by millions. With Bitwarden, you can securely store credentials across your personal and business worlds. It all begins with the creation of your vault, the personal vault. And then when you join an organization, they invite you to participate in their vault. Now you have two vaults. And by the way, Bitwarden makes it very easy to go back and forth between your personal stuff and the business stuff. And they're always isolated from one another, which is great. Bitwarden just added something called, I love this, a username generator. They've always had a password generator. It's one of the great benefits of Bitwarden and any password manager. But the username generator, it's built into the Web Vault, the desktop app, the browser extensions that'll be coming soon to their mobile app, has been highly requested by the community. I think they're the first to do this. The username generator makes it easy to create a random username. So now you have your password and a random username, and even extra level of security and privacy on your logins. It also means that having a different username for every website really makes it much harder to do the credential stuffing, the cross-site credential stuffing that's been such a big problem. It's difficult or impossible for hackers to cross-reference lists of leaked data and find useful information about an individual. The generator will, if you want, create a plus addressed email. So if you're using Gmail or any provider that supports that feature, you can add the random username to your regular email with a plus. It'll still work. There's also a catch-all email address that you can use, or a simple random word. Plus addressing provides extra options for mailbox management, of course, and may reveal any services that have sold email addresses to third parties. Always nice to know. That's one of the reasons I do use a unique username for every single site I sign up for. Other options include a generated email address at a specific domain for a catch-all email account. So, for instance, I control my own domain. I can have unlimited email addresses at that address before the @ sign, so I can use the Bitwarden to generate unique. I just love this. It can also be a simple random word and number to be used as a non-email username. It's very flexible. I think this is just a really great idea. One more reason I love Bitwarden. And for your business, it's a must. Fully customizable, adapts to your business needs. They have Bitwarden Send. They're always adding new features, which is one of the things I love about Bitwarden. It's in very active development. So Bitwarden Send is a fully encrypted method to transmit sensitive information, text or files. This is a very handy way to send files that are of critical privacy importance, but you still can use the public email system, which I think is great. Of course, with Bitwarden, you can always generate not just usernames, but passwords, unique and secure for every site. Enterprise-grade security that's GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA, and SOC 2 compliant. And of course, with an end-to-end encrypted vault, it mitigates phishing as well. Bitwarden knows when you're using the browser plugin, if you're on the wrong site, it won't fill in the password. If you want to do the business thing, the Teams organization is $3 per month per user, which lets you share private data securely with coworkers or a whole department or an entire organization. The enterprise plan, Bitwarden's enterprise organization plan, is just $5 per month per user. Of course, as an individual, you can use that basic free account forever, unlimited number of passwords. You can always upgrade to their premium account for less than $1 a month. I think I pay $10 a year for that, and it's worth it. I do it just to support them. There's a family plan, too. For $3.33 a month, you can have up to 6 users with all the premium features. So that's a nice way to give everybody in the family access to the Bitwarden account. We are fans, of course, as you know, on Security Now of password managers. That's no question. Bitwarden is the one I recommend as the only open source cross-platform password manager that can be used for home, on the go, at work, and it's trusted by millions of individuals, teams, and organizations worldwide. Get started with a free trial of the Teams or Enterprise plan, or simply get started for free across all devices forever as an individual user. And we have their promise. They gave it to me, that it will be free forever. Don't worry about it. They're not going to suddenly say, oh, we're not going to do this free thing anymore. Free forever as an individual user at bitwarden.com/twit. I shifted more than a year ago now, and no looking back. It's fantastic. bitwarden.com/twit. I'm telling everybody about it, including you. Thank you, Bitwarden, for supporting Security Now. All right, Steve, hydration completion?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So, Connecticut, a state in the U.S., for those who are not in the U.S., it's difficult to spell, but once you get the trick, it's okay. The U.S. federal government is not moving forward on consumer privacy protections, so several states have taken matters into their own hands. The state of Connecticut's Attorney General advanced a bill last Thursday that would offer residents a useful set of baseline privacy rights. If signed into law by Connecticut's Governor Ned Lamont, Connecticut would join 4 other states which have already enacted similar legislation. Those 4 are California, Colorado, Virginia, and Utah. Connecticut's bill, which is their SB6, which is named Act Concerning Personal Data Privacy and Online Monitoring, if signed, and the governor's spokespeople are not committing but are not saying no, and it's expected to pass, it would take effect July 1st of next year, 2023. so not immediately, even when signed. And it closely resembles the privacy laws which have already been passed in Colorado, Virginia, and Utah, in that it allows residents of those states to opt out of sales, targeted advertising, and profiling. And after 2 years, by 2025, the law requires companies to acknowledge opt-out preference signals for targeted advertising and sales. Now, websites and companies would be required to proactively obtain consent to process sensitive data and need to offer Connecticut residents ways to revoke that consent. And the law provides that organizations will have no more than 15 days to stop processing data as soon as consent is revoked. Parental consent is needed for any website to collect personal data from children under the age of 13, but businesses are banned from collecting personal data and using targeted advertising on children between the ages of 13 and 16. The bill forces companies to honor browser privacy signals like the Global Privacy Control, thus the title of this podcast, and we'll be talking about that here in a minute. So the consumers can opt out of data sales at all companies in a single step. And as we know, global privacy control, I have in my notes, global privacy control is today's main topic. So we'll be discussing it in detail shortly. So Keir Lamont, the senior counsel at the Future of Privacy Forum, added that Connecticut's privacy bill goes beyond existing state privacy laws by, quote, directly limiting the use of facial recognition technology, establishing default protections for adolescent data, and strengthening consumer choice, including through requiring recognition of many global opt-out signals. Nevertheless, he says, a federal privacy law remains necessary to ensure that all Americans are guaranteed strong baseline protections for the processing of their personal information. Now, the law also joins California and Colorado in adding sunset clauses to the so-called right to cure. In other words, placing an end to that right, which has been regarded and treated as a get-out-of-jail-free card. This right to cure describes a process where companies are given a set amount of time to fix violations before enforcement action can be taken or lawsuits can be filed. In other words, it basically allows them to bypass the law. Its presence has been a hotly debated topic in many state assemblies across the country. It's been the reason why several previous privacy bills have failed to pass. Consumer Reports, which worked with Connecticut lawmakers on their bill, called the right to cure provisions in most privacy laws, they're the ones who coined the term, a get-out-of-jail-free card for companies violating consumer privacy. However, Connecticut's right to cure provision sunsets on December 31st, 2024. Colorado's provision sunsets the next day on January 1st, 2025, but and I say our, Leo, because you and I are both in California, California's sunsets the first of next year, January 1st, 2023, which puts teeth in this for California. Once these sunset, the states will be able to take enforcement action against organizations that violate the law. California, Colorado, and Connecticut are therefore being referred to as the 3 Cs because they all have useful sunset provisions. A lawyer, David Strauss, who serves as chair for the Hush Blackwell law firm's privacy and cybersecurity practice group he said, quote, through joint enforcement, the 3 Cs of state privacy law will be in a unique position to dictate the future of U.S. privacy. Because, as we know, for state laws, any business doing business in that state, which is to say, all businesses, need to abide by the laws within that state. So he said, through joint enforcement, the 3 C's of state privacy law will be in a unique position to dictate the future of U.S. privacy, assuming the continuing absence of any overriding federal law. But this will not be the case with Virginia and Utah, where right to cure will endure. So Connecticut's SB6 also establishes a privacy working group to analyze a number of issues and provide a report by September 1st of this year. And without federal support, it's all a bit of a sticky wicket. Several states have spent years attempting to pass their own privacy laws due to the lack of any movement on privacy legislation at the federal level. Calls for a federal privacy law have ramped up since the European Union's infamous GDPR, their General Data Protection Regulation, became enforceable in 2018, which has served as a model for similar laws in Japan, Brazil, South Korea, and elsewhere. But New York, Texas, Washington, and dozens of other states have faced so far insurmountable pushback when attempting to move their own privacy legislation forward due to backlash from businesses that complain the bills will create a significant amount of extra work for effectively any business with a website. Oh, boo-hoo. Right. You have to pay attention to a signal, an opt-out signal from the browser, and then behave accordingly. Gee. Anyway, the 3 C's, California, Colorado, Connecticut, won't care and won't need to. Any web-based business with a customer in California, Colorado, and presumably Connecticut, once this legislation passes, will need to get their digital act together soon. In the case of California, as I said, by the end of this year, or face legal challenges. And as we'll see, the best news is that the adoption of the new global privacy control browser signal means that we're not all going to be needing to keep clicking something like "I want my privacy" at every website we visit, unlike that horrible cookie mess that we're facing. Okay, now, I ran across this and I loved it. This is Moxie. We all know Moxie Marlon Spike. We've spoken of him often. He's most famous for his hand in the development of Signal, which provides a secure technology for true end-to-end encryption of instant messages. We did a podcast on it years ago. If anyone is interested in how Signal works, of course, WhatsApp is based on Signal. Unlike Telegram, Signal employs standard, proven, and well-understood cryptographic primitives. You can look at it and go, yeah, this is secure. There's no hocus-pocus mumbo-jumbo there. It's just very clever. And that's where that ratchet concept was introduced in order to allow secure messaging even in an asynchronous message passing environment. Well, it turns out that 10 years ago, Moxie took his own stab at his own design and implementation of port knocking. For anyone who's interested, it's on GitHub. I've got the link in the show notes. And I won't go into it in depth. It's just another way to solve the same problem. But what I loved, and the reason I'm mentioning it today, is that Moxie ended his page with a section titled, "Why is this even necessary?" which I wanted to share because it'll sound quite familiar. In answer to that question, Moxie wrote, "You are running network services with security vulnerabilities in them, period." And then he said, again, "You are running network services with security vulnerabilities in them." He said, "If you're running a server, this is almost universally true. Most software is complex. It changes rapidly, and innovation tends to make it more complex. It is going to be forever, hopelessly insecure. Even projects like OpenSSH that were designed from the ground up with security in mind where every single line of code is written with security as a top priority, where countless people audit the changes that are made every day, even projects like this have suffered from remotely exploitable vulnerabilities. If this is true, what hope do the network services that are written with different priorities have? He said the name of the game is to isolate, compartmentalize, and expose running services as little as possible. He says that's where Knock Knock comes in. That's the name of his solution. Given that your network services are insecure, you want to expose as few of them to the world as possible. He finished saying, I offer Knock Knock as a possible solution to minimize exposure. So from the mouth of Moxie, there it is. As I said, it should sound familiar to anybody who's tired of listening to me say the same thing on this podcast. All of the evidence that we have, that we cover every week, proves this point over and over and over, exactly as Moxie stated. So it's a reason why, I'm a big fan when you have fixed IPs on your endpoints. Absolutely use firewall, IP-based firewall filters so that nobody anywhere else has any access to the ports which you have opened between two fixed locations. And even if they're mostly fixed, as I've said, if you've got a cable modem, that IP is not changing often, like nearly never. So even there, it's feasible to do IP-based point-to-point filtering. And if you need to connect to clients that are going to have a floating IP, some form of port knocking, some form of out-of-band or kind of quasi-in-band authentication in order to then give that IP and port temporary access, it makes all the sense in the world. And there are, widely available tools for making it happen. You just have to decide to. Okay, some feedback from our listeners. D. Stacer wrote from @D. Stacer. He said, how can a cryptocurrency wallet in a browser be a very bad idea, while LastPass and other browser-based password managers are a very good idea? That's a really good question. I had to think about a bit about how to explain why I still feel that both of those apparently opposing evaluations can both be true at the same time. I think it boils down to necessity and practicality. It is not necessary to use a browser as a cryptocurrency wallet. It would be far safer to perform a wallet's operations in a more secure container, in any other more secure container. And it would be and is practical to do so. Most people do. I also agree that a browser is not as secure as I would wish it were for the storage of all of my most precious static passwords in any password manager. But it's pretty much necessary to integrate a password manager into our browser, and it would be far less practical not to have that integration. If a password manager were not integrated, we would need to manually look up every site we were visiting, then display, copy, and paste our username and password for that site into the browser. And it passes through the clipboard, which has been a problem in malware that monitors the contents of our clipboards. We would also be at an increased risk from lookalike phishing domains, since we might be fooled by paypol.com, whereas an integrated password manager would not be. This podcast has well established that browsers are today's #1 attack targets. They are the attack surface which we all present to the internet as we move about. They're not perfectly secure. They're not as secure as we could wish they were. Yet, we are not seeing reports of browser-native password databases nor third-party password manager extensions being hacked. So it must be that unlike the mistake we discussed last week that was made in the browser-based cryptocurrency wallet add-on, those who are authoring and maintaining both browser-native and third-party password managers are really taking their jobs and responsibilities seriously. They may not be sleeping well at night, and I know if I was responsible for this, I wouldn't be, but that's so that we can. Alan Neville, he tweeted, "Hi, Steve. Regarding SpinRight 6.1, I use a Raspberry Pi 4 as a NAS. Will 6.1 be able to run on the Pi?" No. I replied to Alan, SpinRight is lovingly written in native x86 assembly language. So it is and has always been intimately tied to the Intel x86 processors. So there's no way that version 6.1, at least, of SpinRight will run on anything other than a system with an Intel processor. The only way to run SpinRight on a mass storage device from a non-Intel platform will be to temporarily move the device to any Intel PC. And of course, the good news is that SpinRight 6.1 is so fast now that a great deal of testing and maintenance can be accomplished in very little time. But, never say never. I don't know perfectly what the future of SpinRight is, but for the foreseeable future at least, even 7 and 7.x and everything that I know of in the future, it's still going to be Intel based. Someone whose handle is at FIZCH, Fizch, he tweeted, a few weeks ago, you mentioned a piece of networking equipment that you use for segmenting your network. For the life of me, I cannot find that episode of Security Now, nor do I remember what the device was. Can you shed some light on this for me? And yes, I recall pointing up over my shoulder at the little SG 1100 firewall router by Netgate, which runs pfSense and can do everything you might ever want a little router to do. Since it has separate physical LAN, WAN, and auxiliary interfaces, it's perfect for creating an isolated IoT network whose devices can only see each other on the same sub-LAN, and they can see the internet, but not across each other's network. And if anyone, if you just Google Netgate SG-1100, it'll take you right there. And, I literally, it's what I'm using on my network right now. Yep, there it is. Neat little gizmo. And it's a turnkey pfSense firewall, and pfSense will do anything. Ben Hutton tweeted at SGGRC, he says, I'm a little behind, but in SN 856, you mentioned that you wouldn't want to be able to translate two-factor authentication generation data back into the original QR codes. He said, but some apps allow for export and import. Could you explain how this is different, please? Okay, so a two-factor authenticator receives a QR code from a website to establish a two-factor identity for a user. The site will generate and store a random secret key which it associates with a user's account. It will then display that random key in the form of a QR code. The use of a QR code allows that key to be easily transmitted optically to an authenticator app on the user's smartphone using its camera. If we didn't have QR codes or something similar, the site would need to have the user, it would have to display like the private key in hex or something, and have the user manually enter that key on the smartphone's touchscreen, which will be a nightmare. So using a QR code for this is a huge convenience. And at that moment, by the way, when the QR code is being displayed by the website, is when I press Control-P to capture and print that page for my own offline QR code authentication archive. The reason I would rather use an authentication app that does not allow for private key export is that anyone who might be able to arrange to obtain brief unlocked access to my phone might export my collection of authenticator private keys, thus defeating all of the multi-factor security I've come to rely upon. The only valid reason to ever need to export an authenticator's private key repository would be to move them to another authenticator app, for instance. But since I keep all of those keys printed on paper, I never need to export anything. I only need to re-import my private key archive, which is in the form of a sheaf of printed papers, each containing one QR code. Bruce Schneier's famous advice regarding passwords applies here. Many years ago, Bruce said, "Do not memorize your passwords. Write them down. They should be so complex that you cannot possibly remember them all, and we're very good at managing bits of paper," Bruce said. And note that printing these QR codes has the inherent advantage of moving the archive offline. It's true that someone with physical access who knew where this little sheaf of papers was stored could obtain all my authenticator QR codes. But that's not the threat model we're attempting to protect against. And if it were, safety deposit boxes or a safe or any sort of physical lockbox is a long-established means for protecting that kind of real-world asset. The threat model we're attempting to thwart is online. So moving their backup offline provides for added protection. And one last point is that I understand that it's not as high-tech to print QR codes on paper, but it's our technologies that often bite us in the butt. Sometimes, especially where security matters, a bit of judiciously placed low-tech is the more secure solution, even if it's less glamorous. Okay, so after our final sponsor, we're going to talk about the new hope in town, global privacy control.
Let's do it in just a second. But first, a word from our sponsor, as usual. We've got to take a little break here. Our show today brought to you by IT Pro TV. You know I'm a big fan of IT Pro TV. We've been with them since they started out, I think. Tim and Don went to an event I did at NAB in which we were talking about, what TWiT does. And they said, boy, they were already IT trainers. They said, boy, that'd be a good way to do IT training. And IT Pro TV was born. And they're doing great. 7 studios in their Gainesville, Florida headquarters, running Monday through Friday all day, recording new content. And the reason they do that is you always have to keep the content up to date if you're doing IT training, because everything changes. New versions of the software, new tests for the certs. You just got to be always updating. And IT Pro TV always is. If you have an IT team, I always talk about IT Pro TV for individuals, but if you have an IT team, you should consider IT Pro TV to keep their skills up, to keep their certs up to date. They have a great business offer. And I think just as important, when you use IT Pro TV and you give that to your IT team for training, they appreciate it because it's engaging, it's informative, it's easy to digest, all 20 to 30-minute chunks, each course divided up so they can do a bit at a time. And by the way, people love IT Pro TV's videos. 80% of the people who start a video at IT Pro TV go all the way to the end, finish it. That's a good sign, right? It means they get engaged immediately. They're learning. They go, yeah. And you want that. You want your team to go, yeah, I love this. Courses are entertaining and binge-worthy, which keeps your team not only interested, but vested in learning. IT Pro TV will get you the training and certs for your team, all of the training and certs they need in one place. Every vendor, every skill you need for your IT training, including Microsoft IT training, Cisco, Linux, Apple security, cloud, and on and on and on, even the compliance and soft skills. So it is a one-stop shop for all the training, more than 5,800 hours of on-demand training. And their dashboard for the business plan is great. You can track your team's results, manage seats, assign and unassigned team members. You can even do subsets of teams, whole teams, customizing the assignments for them. You can monitor their progress. You can get reporting on usage of the platform to make sure that your investment is paying off. Things like logins, viewing time, tracks completed, monthly usage reports. Assignments can be full courses or even individual episodes within courses. And because every course at IT Pro TV has a transcript, it's really easy to find the part of the course you want to focus on and say, hey, gang, you really need to learn this. You need to learn this subject. You'll get immediate insight into your team's viewing patterns and progress over any period of time. And the reports are visual, so you can show them to the bean counters, people who write the checks, and say, see, look, see, it's working. It's working. So for individuals as well as for businesses, the best place to get your IT training, IT Pro TV. Give your team the IT development platform they need to level up their skills and enjoy the journey too, because it should be fun, right? IT Pro TV for teams from 2 to 1,000. Volume discounts start at 5 seats. The website is itpro.tv/security now. And when you're there, when you talk to your account executive, don't forget to say SN30, SN30, so you'll get an additional 30% off on the business plan. So you may get volume discounts as well. This is in addition to that, SN30. Visit itpro.tv/security now. And by the way, individual users use that code too. Get 30% off as long as you're active forever. itpro.tv/security now. Offer code SN30. We thank them so much for making Security Now possible. And now, speaking of the possible, or maybe the impossible, global privacy control. Hit it, Steve.
Okay. So, what is global privacy control? Believe it or not, it is what was clearly the right solution and what I was vocally arguing for as being obviously the right solution when its predecessor, known as Do Not Track, was first proposed 13 years ago, back in 2009. Yes, during this podcast. Leo, we've been around for a while. We are finally going to get it. It will have legally enforceable teeth, and I could not be more pleased. I got a kick out of this. This is what Wikipedia has to say about Do Not Track, and it's useful because it also reminds us of a few things that happened. Wikipedia says Do Not Track, DNT, is a no longer official HTTP header field designed to allow Internet users to opt out of tracking by websites, which includes the collection of data regarding a user's activity across multiple distinct contexts and the retention, use, or sharing of data derived from that activity outside the context in which it occurred. The Do Not Track header was originally proposed in 2009 by researchers Christopher Segoyan, Sid Stam, and Dan Kaminsky. Mozilla Firefox became the first browser to implement the feature, while Internet Explorer, Apple's Safari, Opera, and Google Chrome all later added support. Efforts to standardize Do Not Track by the W3C in the Tracking Preference Expression Working Group reached only the candidate recommendation stage and ended in September 2018 due to insufficient deployment and support. DNT, they write, is not widely adopted by the industry, with companies citing the lack of legal mandates for its use, as well as unclear standards and guidelines for how websites are to interpret the header. Thus, critics purport that it is not guaranteed that enabling DNT will actually have any effect at all. The W3C disbanded its DNT working group in January 2019, citing insufficient support and adoption. Apple discontinued support for DNT the following month, citing browser fingerprinting concerns. As of November 2021, Mozilla Firefox continues to support DNT. In Firefox, the feature is turned on by default in private browsing mode and optional in regular mode. In 2020, a coalition of U.S.-based internet companies announced the Global Privacy Control header that spiritually succeeds the Do Not Track header. The creators hope that this new header will meet the definition of user-enabled global privacy controls defined by the California Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA, and European General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. In this case, the new header would be automatically strengthened by existing laws and companies would be required to honor it. Okay, so that was DNT. What we will be getting is GPC. If I go to the globalprivacycontrol.org website, so it's Global Privacy Control, globalprivacycontrol.org website with Chrome, the top of the page looks like, and I have a picture of it in the show notes. There's a red dot, and it says GPC signal not detected. And since this is the globalprivacycontrol.org site, it says, please download a browser or extension that supports it. But if I go to the same site with Firefox, after enabling Firefox's already present and built-in global privacy control settings, I'm greeted with a different banner at the top. I get a green dot and the words GPC signal detected. So, from a technology standpoint, GPC has 100% of the elegant simplicity that made DNT such an obviously correct solution. The specifications abstract reads, this is the abstract for GPC. It reads, this document defines a signal transmitted over HTTP and through the DOM. That's one additional feature that we'll talk about in a second, that conveys a person's request to websites and services to not sell or share their personal information with third parties. This standard is intended to work with existing and upcoming legal frameworks that render such requests enforceable. The specifications introduction explains, they say, building websites today often requires relying on services provided by businesses other than the one which a person chooses to interact with. This result is a natural consequence of the increasing complexity of web technology and of the division of labor between different services. While this architecture can be used in the service of better web experiences, it can also be abused to violate privacy, which perfectly contextualizes this issue. Several legal frameworks exist, and more are on the way, within which people have the right to request that their privacy be protected, including requests that their data not be sold or shared between the businesses with which they intend to interact. Requiring that people manually express their rights for each and every site they visit is, however, impractical. Okay, then they cite a chunk of the California Consumer Protection Act, which reads, this is from the CCPA, given the ease and frequency by which personal information is collected and sold when a consumer visits a website, consumers should have a similarly easy ability to request to opt out globally. This regulation, that is the California Consumer Protection Act, now in force and in law in California, and the get out of free jail card is sunsetting and ending at the end of this year, says this regulation offers consumers a global choice to opt out of the sale of personal information as opposed to going website by website to make individual requests with each business each time they use a new browser or a new device. So in other words, thank goodness we're not going to need to be going, doing something like clicking on, yes, I'll accept your cookies, the equivalent of wherever we go. And then back to the specification for GPC, they said this specification addresses the issue by providing a way to signal through an HTTP header or the DOM a person's assertion of their applicable rights to prevent selling data about them to third parties or sharing data with them. This signal is equivalent, for example, to the global privacy control in the CCPA regulations. And I'll get to that in a second. So, as I said, the specification could not be more clear or easy to implement. I have a sample header in the show notes, whereas do not track was DNT:1 to enable it. This one is SEC, probably short for security, SEC hyphen, then GPC:1. That's it. Your browser, when it makes a query to any asset, it's going to have it's going to say get as the verb or maybe post and then the URL. Then there'll be a host : header that tells the site which host it wants. So like, example.com, and then SEC-GPC:1 to say, I am requesting of you, the site associated with this query from my browser, that you abide by these regulations. So it defines and standardizes this new HTTP header, SEC-GPC, which, when affirmatively set, has the value of 1, meaning true. Okay, now for a minute, recall the mess that ensued when Microsoft decided to have Internet Explorer 10 default to transmitting that DNT:1 header. Wikipedia reminds us of this. They wrote, with IE 10, when using the express settings upon installation, a do not track option was enabled by default for IE 10 and Win 8. Microsoft faced criticism for its decision to enable do not track by default from advertising companies who say that use of the do not track header should be a choice made by the user and must not be automatically enabled. The companies also said that this decision would violate the Digital Advertising Alliance's agreement with the U.S. government to honor a do-not-track system, because the coalition said it would only honor such a system if it were not enabled by default by web browsers. A Microsoft spokesperson defended its decision, however, stating that users would prefer a web browser that automatically respected their privacy. On September 7th, 2012, Roy Fielding, an author of the Do Not Track standard, committed a patch to the source code of the Apache HTTP server, which would make the server explicitly ignore any use of the Do Not Track header by users of Internet Explorer 10. Fielding wrote that Microsoft's decision deliberately violates, unquote, the do not track specification because it does not protect anyone's privacy unless the recipients believe it was set by a real human being with a real preference for privacy over personalization. The do not track specification did not explicitly mandate that the use of do not track actually be a choice until after the feature was implemented in Internet Explorer 10. According to Fielding, Microsoft knew its do not track signals would be ignored and that its goal was to effectively give the illusion of privacy while still catering to their own interests. On October 9th, of 2012, so he patched it on September 11th. On October 9th of 2012, just a little over 1 month later, Fielding's patch was commented out, restoring the previous correct behavior for Apache because nobody agreed with him. On April 3rd, 2015, Microsoft announced that starting with Windows 10, it would comply with the specification and no longer automatically enable Do Not Track as part of the operating system's express default settings. But the company will, quote, provide customers with clear information on how to turn on this feature in the browser settings should they wish to. Okay, so to prevent any of this, the formal specification for the new SEC-GPC header clearly states, they said, a user agent must not generate a SEC-GPC header field if the person's global privacy control preference is not enabled or defaulted to. But they allow it to be defaulted to. A user agent must generate an SEC-GPC header field with a field value that is exactly the numeric character 1 if the user's global privacy control preference is set. A user agent must not generate more than one SEC-GPC in a given request and must not use a SEC-GPC field in an HTTP trailer. They're rare. Hardly anyone uses them. We talked about them once before. A server processing an HTTP request that contains an SEC-GPC header must ignore it and process the request as if the header had not been specified unless the field value is exactly the character 1. If there are multiple SEC-GPC headers and at least one has a field value of 1, then the server must treat the request as if there were only one SEC-GPC header with a field value of 1 and as if there were none otherwise. HTTP intermediaries must not remove an SEC-GPC header set to 1, but they may remove SEC-GPC headers that contain other values. Additionally, an HTTP intermediary that has reasons to believe that the person originating a given HTTP request has a do not sell or share preference may insert an SEC-GPC header set to 1. So the specification also defines, as I noted, a new top-level JavaScript global value, global privacy control, which allows any script running in the browser to determine whether the query which loaded that script sent the SEC-GPC1 header to the server. And in the sample script that they have some JavaScript. They have an if statement with parens, and then they start with an exclamation point, bang, for negating. So if not navigator dot global privacy control, and then in curly braces they have the comment, wonderful, we can sell this person's data, meaning global privacy control was not set in this browser or for this query. Since the only thing that differentiates this from the earlier DNT effort is the promise of legal enforcement under the European Union's GDPR, and at least in California and soon Colorado and Connecticut, I was curious to look at that a bit more closely. Wikipedia closes out their discussion by noting, GPC is a valid do not sell my personal information signal according to the California Consumer Privacy Act, which stipulates that websites are legally required to respect a signal sent by users who want to opt out of having their personal data sold. In July of 2021, the California Attorney General clarified through an FAQ that under law, the global privacy control signal must be honored. Now, as a California resident, this made me curious to read the actual California legislation, so I found it. But don't worry, I'm not going to drag everyone through it. I'll just note that I am completely satisfied with what the legalese says. I'm not an attorney, but it was written in very clear and concise English, which, to my untrained eye, leaves zero wiggle room this time. They're not screwing around. For anyone who's curious to see for themselves, I have a link to the 28-page PDF where on page 17, and this is just an excerpt from the entire legislation. So this is a small chunk of it. That's why it's only 28 pages. But on its page 17, paragraph 999.315 is titled Requests to Opt Out. And anyone who's interested can follow that. So it appears that we're about to get what we wanted and hoped for more than a decade ago. If you're a Firefox user, bring up your browser's detailed configuration settings by entering about:config in the URL field, as we've talked about many times. Then enter privacy.global as the search term to reduce those gazillion items that will come up to just 2. Then double-click on each to flip them from false to true, which will also make them bold. Then head over to https://globalprivacycontrol.org, and at the top of that page, you'll see that your Firefox browser is now, and hopefully forever, transmitting your legally enforceable assertion that you do not give your permission that you are affirmatively revoking permission and choosing to opt out of any site that you visit's legal right to share your information with any other entity for any purpose whatsoever.
And they will honor it.
And as individuals, we don't need to enforce that right, since once California's right to cure provision sunsets at the end of this year, it seems clear that the biggest violators of consumers' asserted legal rights to privacy will be taken to task by California's Attorney General, who has clearly stated their intention to do exactly that. Now, although Chrome is becoming increasingly conspicuous for not directly supporting the transmission of this GPC signal, plenty of Chrome-compatible add-ons and other browsers already do. Abeen, Brave, Disconnect, DuckDuckGo, OptMeOut, and Privacy Badger. Now, being a perennial minimalist, it would be nice if uBlock Origin were to add the GPC header for us, since I already have uBlock Origin installed everywhere, including in Chrome. But Gore Hill was asked about 6 months ago whether or not he would consider doing so, and he declined on the basis that it was just another DNT fiasco. That doesn't appear to be true, so there's some hope that in the future he might reconsider, although he is extremely curmudgeonly, so
highly unlikely.
Perhaps not. For me, I'm liking the new add-on OptMeOut, where the U of out is instead a W, making it meow, as in cat's meow. So it's spelled OPTMEOWT, opt me out.
Opt me out.
The reason I like the way the reason is I like the way it looks, and it was developed by some guys who have been deep into the global privacy control effort. Their names are listed as contributors to the spec. They're at the Wesleyan University's Privacy Tech Lab. Wesleyan's a private college in Middletown, Connecticut, probably not coincidentally, where this legislation is on the verge of making them the third C of, with California and Colorado preceding. Opt Me Out is free and open source and hosted on GitHub. It's about 2.5 meg, so it's a relatively small download. And their page at GitHub has a bunch of other privacy-related projects for anyone who's interested. It's available from the Chrome Web Store and supports all of the many Chromium-based browsers. So Chrome, Brave, Edge, Opera, and Vivaldi. The Brave browser began testing default inclusion of the GPC header last October. So it's probably well in place by now, and you just, if you're a Brave user, just go to Global Privacy Control. I expect you're already going to see a green light shining back at you without needing to add anything else. So by all means, check to see whether your browser may already support it, like Firefox did, and I didn't know it and didn't have it turned on. Now I do, and it is. So if your browser doesn't have it, this little opt me out looks like a slick way to add it. I've got a picture of its settings page here at the bottom of the show notes. It's just got 3 buttons. Enable, which sends do not sell signals to every visited domain, or you can be selective if you like. You can give it a domain list, which sends do not sell signals according to the custom domain list, which you can provide, or you can disable, does not send any do not sell signals. So it took us a long time to get here, Leo, but this is certainly encouraging. And boy, this would just be great.
Yeah, because what we've had to do is develop tools that block tracking, fingerprinting and things like that, because companies just, they're not. They want it. They want it.
Yeah. If we don't tell them no, and if they don't suffer legal recourse in the event of ignoring what we're telling them, they're going to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yep. So you think that thanks to Europe, Connecticut, and California, they're gonna honor this? Sites will have to. Great.
Yes.
Good.
Yes. Well, look what GDPR did to our cookies. I mean, it's a pain in the butt, but
everybody does it. Everybody does it.
Yes, exactly.
We're all scared to death of them.
Yep.
Even though it's a completely meaningless regulation.
And they will sue. I mean, and it looks like California is saying, look, you're going to honor this law, or you're not going to do business in California. Good. Well, you can't not do business in California.
Right. Wow, that's great. Well, thank you, Steve. As always, some great information, and I am now going to go around to all my Firefoxes and do about config and turn on those global privacy control. There's 2 settings. You just flip them to true, and you're right. It says I'm green light now, which is amazing. So another reason to like Firefox, although you said there are other browsers that will do this. Just Chrome is the only one that won't, probably.
That's good. Well, now, apparently they did support DNT at some point, so I think they'll end up saying, okay, fine, we're not happy, but
I hope so. Yeah. Steve Gibson.
Leo, that's big. I mean, that shuts everything down.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really big.
Yeah. It's kind of stunning. Yeah. Wow. GlobalPrivacyControl.org is another place to go to learn more about it.
Yep.
Steve Gibson, see, now you know why you have to be here Tuesdays. You really do. Listen to this show. You don't have to listen to it live because you can get it, of course, downloaded from Steve's site. He's got a couple of unique versions. He has a 64 kilobit audio. That's the mainstream version. But he also has a 16 kilobit audio file for the bandwidth impaired, and transcripts, which make it very easy to search for something you're interested in. You can even correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but I think you can search all the transcripts all at once with Google, right? So you could
can use Google, and I also have a search box on GRC,
Perfect.
and it knows in order to constrain it just to Security Now.
So it'll get all of them, and you can find them. Did Steve ever talk about? Yes, he did, and it's right here. That's great. Great stuff. GRC.com. While you're there, pick up SpinRight. We are inching closer, maybe even striding closer to version 6.1. 6.0 is current, though, and if you buy it at grc.com, you will be freely upgraded to 6.1 as long as you buy it now. You also get to participate in the upgrade, upgrade to 6.1. So that's kind of fun. There's a forum and all sorts of stuff. grc.com. Steve's also on Twitter if you want to leave him a comment at SGGRC, and his DMs are open. So slide on in, as the kids say. We have on-demand versions of the 64 kilobit audio and video, strangely enough, on our website, which is twit.tv/SN. There's a YouTube channel full of videos, and you could subscribe in your favorite podcast client. That's another way to do it. Steve has a link to the RSS, as do we. Just paste that in, and you'll get it the minute it's available. If you are in a hurry and you do want to watch it live, the freshest version of Security Now, we do it on Tuesdays around 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern, 20:30 UTC at live.twit.tv. There's live audio and video, so you can listen at dinner or lunch, and learn, listen and learn, we call it. And if you are listening or watching live, please chat with us live at irc.twit.tv. Of course, Club Twit members are always chatting about this show and everything else going on in our Discord channel, which is so much fun. Highly recommend it. The Discord channel is not just about the shows. We have, of course, a channel for all the shows, but we also have channels about every kind of geeky subject, including sci-fi. And we have Stacy's book club in there. She's going to do the new Neil Stephenson book next month. We have Fireside Chats. Scott Wilkinson's coming up on Thursday. Father Robert on next Thursday. We have the Untitled Linux show and GizFizz and other shows that don't make it out into the real world, but they stay in the safe, quiet, calm confines of the Discord and the Club Twit feed, Twit Plus feed. All of that and ad-free versions of all the shows, $7 a month when you go to twit.tv/clubtwit. Thanks in advance. I think I've now plugged everything. Well, one more thing. I am told, a few cabins left. If you want to go with me and Paul Thurrott to Alaska in July on the Holland America Eurodom, it's going to be a great cruise, lots of fun. We're going to see, I'm told we're going to see bears, otters, and bald eagles, as well as glaciers, what's left of them. Cruise.twit.tv. Still some cabins left. And I would like anybody who wants to go. They have, inexpensive cabins if you want.
How long are you away from Twit?
I'll just miss a week, so I'll miss one show, July 16th to the 23rd. We're going to go early. I think Thursday we're going to go up to Seattle, spend some time there. Mary Jo Foley told us about a good dive bar we can get wasted in, so that'll be fun. Then we'll get on the boat all hungover. I can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun. Cruise.twit.tv. You do not have to be a club member to go. By all means, everybody should join us. I invited you, but Steve said, no, Lori won't let me go. So, you're stuck ashore. We'll have to do a land tour for you and Lori. We'll figure something out. Thanks, Steve. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Security Now.
Okay, buddy. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, I'm Rod Pyle, editor of Ad Astra magazine, and each week I'm joined by Tarek Malik, the editor-in-chief over at Space.com, in our new This Week in Space podcast. Every Friday, Tarek and I take a deep dive into the stories that define the new space age. What's NASA up to? When will Americans once again set foot on the moon? And how about those samples from the Perseverance rover? When are those coming home? What the heck has Elon Musk done now? In addition to all the latest and greatest in space exploration, we'll take an occasional look at bits of spaceflight history that you probably never heard of, and all with an eye towards having a good time along the way. Check us out on your favorite podcatcher.
Security Now.